Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can hear me. We have a quorum to begin our work. Ladies and gentlemen, delegates, today we are beginning the final day of this conference, the 6th Regional Conference on Social Development in Latin America and the Caribbean. I hope you've had a good night and a good rest. We still have some work to do. We'll begin today with panel 5, Emerging Channels for Inclusive Social Development in Latin America and the Caribbean, Labor Inclusion and Climate, Demographic, and Technological Change. That's a very current subject to be. We talk about restrictions for inclusive social development. We have structural restrictions, but we have not talked about some emergency things such as climate change, technological problems. When we talked about artificial intelligence back then, was the demographic transitions and technological change. Some of them have been affected by COVID. So now we're in a transition process. It's not just one issue, but it's a return to the early times when the social protection systems were different. Now today, we have the participation, in addition to Renato Godinho, the head of Brazil's Ministry of Social Development, and together with him we have the presence of our friend here, Kirk Humphrey. Welcome, Kirk, from the Minister of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs in Barbados, and our development of Yolanda Lorin, Minister of Human Development and Social Inclusion in Costa Rica, Berta Zapeta, Vice Minister of Social Development and Ministry of Social Development in Guatemala, Gloria Reyes, General Director of Social Development Division in the Dominican Republic, and Vinicius Pinheiro, the Regional Director at the Latin American and Caribbean International Labor Organization, ILO. Together with Luis Enrique de Paiva from UNDP and the office run by Luis Flores from ECLAC. I will now go back to Spanish. The objective of this roundtable, as we see in the position document that was distributed this week, is precisely to focus on these emerging challenges and what they mean for social protection systems and the role of the ministries of social development. Thinking that it's not enough to look at social reality and the causes of the features of poverty we see today, malnutrition and inequality, but to look forward with a strategic outlook, a more prospective outlook, what's accelerating and what's coming, what's new, with the opportunities and also great challenges, as we said, from like climate change, new technologies, and how this affects labor inclusion, and can they become stones in our shoes, keeping us from easily moving forward under global impacts in our work for inclusive social development. So in this panel, we'll have 2 rounds of remarks. The first will be 5 minutes each, and the second 3 minutes for each of our guests at this head table to talk first about, on this list of new challenges, emerging challenges. I've mentioned some of them. In the international context, there's already another major challenge in that politics come in with different focuses on how to deal with restrictions and also to find opportunities. What are the priorities, therefore, that each countries draw from these emerging challenges for social development in particular, and social protection, and what are they doing to that end? In the second round, I will go back to the questions about what we are asking or what we are promising for the world in the coming years on these issues.
By just giving some general remarks, which is to suggest that we must not try to study social protection in a vacuum. And in fact, social protection exists within a much broader framework, national, regional, and a global context. And if we fail to look at these layers, then the analysis is incomplete. And my challenge sometimes in social spaces is that we limit our conversation to a very narrow understanding of social protection, but we must understand the wider context. And so I'm thankful that the Caribbean has an opportunity to speak to the issues in the Caribbean. Barbados, like most states, we have vulnerabilities. I won't go through all of them: climate change, lack of diversification, small populations, high debt. We know the stories. And I think we began by looking at our social budget. If you look at our social budget over time, we've invested significantly in the social sector. But when you start to deconstruct that, you realize most of that spending is on health and on education. And that social protection is not necessarily as highly spent as other areas. And I think all of us must begin by deconstructing what it is exactly that we do. And so we wanted to find a system that would allow us in a technological world to have one ministry, one department that is interoperable, so that our systems can speak to one another. We've done very well in Barbados, but most of our systems operate in silos, and silos can constrict the flow of information and the progress of people. We now have to determine that what we must have are systems that are fit for purpose, and that systems that recognize that transformation is the key. The one thing we've come to appreciate is that persons who work in the welfare space are not necessarily the persons best suited to work in the empowerment space. So that you might have a ministry responsible for people empowerment, which is my ministry, which is a social ministry, but at the same time is not very good at empowering people. And that there must be different strategies for keeping people above the poverty line, but then when you want to move them to something else, you need to have different strategies. We created an entirely new department, the Social Empowerment Agency, specifically to be able to do that. I think the one point that I also want to make is that we found that it was necessary to exhibit global leadership. So you would find that our Prime Minister, Ms. Lemotley, has been speaking on debt for the climate swaps, the British Tongue Initiative, a number of areas, because we feel that to talk about social protection in a vacuum without recognizing where we are located and the challenges we face is problematic. And at the end of the day, all of our programs prioritize people. But what exactly have we done for our vulnerable groups? We believe that resilience defines our people. Our people are very protection. There are new laws on the books all around. We've created new agencies, so we've revised, recognized that our institutions work, but that they're old and need revision. We've recognized and we've changed that and brought technology into the sphere. And then the last point I would want to raise before we come around to the second point of questions is in relation to how do we orient social and labor inclusion policies. The Caribbean has a very highly educated population. And like most places in the world, that is now impacted by technology. Our view is that we must shift from being consumers of technology to creators of technology. And if we can't be creators, at least let us master the technology. But most of us are so afraid of modern technology, still afraid of AI, still afraid of what these things can do. We have to master it, but I do believe we have to be able to create it. And the Caribbean, particularly Barbados, is extremely risk averse. And therefore, we have to have a people now who can take calculated risk going forward. So in the in the labor space, we've been doing constant training and retraining. We realize that we must upskill our labor to meet these new demands. We've been doing different things in our schools to ensure that in our schools we can produce a labor force that is fit for purpose and fit for the new world, because the world is changing. And a lot of the things we taught in schools many years ago will not produce a modern person fit for the new world. And therefore, we have to deconstruct the challenges or triggers that we've been so loyal to the systems, the old systems that work, that it gives us problems when we try to change them to fit into a new world. But we have to be able to do that. So currently, we're reconstructing the Ministry of Labor to be better able to address some of these issues. We have a decent work program, 2025 to 2030, recognizing that it must be rooted in justice so that the disabled have a chance, young people have a chance. And so when we set up a Barbados job registry that is digital, it's a transparent platform for job matching so that anyone can go and see what jobs are available and be matched to those jobs appropriately. And we have a Caribbean view that we must be a hub for new technologies. If we can be a hub for new technologies, then imagine the amount of jobs we can create, the difference it will make to our education system, the difference it would make to our economies in terms of the new jobs and the opportunities. I will stop there, but obviously there are many other things that we can say, but I only have 5 minutes. But in relation to just going forward, I just think all of us have to look to deconstruct our systems and reconstruct them in relation to the challenges and what the new world has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister Humphrey, for your outlook and for opening our discussion, talking about overcoming the challenges, breaking out of silos, and realizing that what worked in the past may not necessarily work in the challenge, and we have to deconstruct and reconstruct things in the process, emphasizing participation in the challenge of new technologies that have appeared as a central issue and being highlighted amongst the new challenge and emerging challenges. Now I'll give the floor to Minister Yorleni Leon from Custom. So we must set priorities. Must set priorities on the challenges. For me personally, I'm very concerned that we face so much noise, so many things that paralyze us. So in setting priorities, in Costa Rica, we have found it important the following issues. One priority is the growth of the population, not just in terms of the system, the care system, but also the impacts for a country whose population is getting older fast and where aging is increasing, and an elderly population in the country which is losing its economic development. So in these 3 days, we've seen that economic growth is one of the important traps for development, that if we don't pay close attention, we will face serious problems. Without growth, ladies and gentlemen, there's no income, and if there's no income, it's very difficult to maintain or sustain or expand the care system. and implying that the situations are becoming even more complex. Another priority we have is climate change. The losses and setbacks that we are facing due to climate change are brutal. And as the minister from Barbados said minutes ago, that we have to have faith that things will happen. In 2024, we had several emergencies. We didn't finish the first one when a new one came. And this did not just mean so much work and anguish, but also it kept us from being able to keep developing our programs, our projects, and it also kept us from spending 100% of the budgets that we had assigned. We had worked in the issue of resilience. This is a mechanism we have identified that has to soften the impacts of that situation, which is coming back more and more every year, stronger and stronger. So we are paying more attention to social promotion, the third issue. And when we talk about social protection for us, this is not enough. We must work hard in social promotion and as a mechanism for homes to find options to break out of the circle of poverty so that little by little they can improve their conditions. This will still be the biggest social mobilizer, and not just formal training, but education, but also technical training and for certain skills, so people can break out of those conditions and find opportunities. These are, in the case of Costa Rica, these are options that are very important for people who are behind in schooling. Then funding. Affordable funding is very important for social promotion, and it's very important to facilitate tools that have to do with interest rates and volume so that productive projects can take place. And this has to come with technical assistance to help people not only to think about their projects, but also to complement them and be able to grow and become sustainable in their initiatives in the long term.
And lastly, the very important theme of the institutional frameworks, a strong, robust, vigorous, smart institutional framework fully integrated with the remainder of the country's territory. I think it is time for us to no longer think only about ourselves, but rather to expand our participation horizon, whereby we can build relevant responses. We believe it is not very likely that the social sector will be able to uphold in a solidarity-based manner, as has been the case, the response to these challenges. At least not. Many institutions think that everyone has breakfast and that everyone has the same needs and that every territory has exactly the same kind of behavior, and this is totally far from reality. When we think of services that meet people's needs, that requires an institutional framework that is capable of recognizing and acknowledging the existing differences, and therefore, by means of different services to be provided, it should approach these target audiences. That is when you place people at the center of the agenda. We want institutional frameworks, as we say in Costa Rica, to address with people eye to eye, hand in hand, in different walks of life. Because in isolation, the social sector in and of itself will not be able to meet all of these challenges. Now, what are we doing in Costa Rica? Given these priorities, we are working very strongly towards social promotion, very strongly. We appreciate and attach value to each family member and those who need it will receive social protection, and those who also need it will receive social promotion services. And we have been endowing them that will give them two exit ways, the employability exit way or the self-employment pathway, by means of different enterprises or entrepreneurial projects, which has allowed us to focus a great deal on professional training and capacity building, technical assistance and advice, as well as a strong emphasis on professions and skills. We also have a platform which is connected to the ANE, National Employment Platform, which means they gain visibility in the eyes of employers, meaning that they enjoy and have a greater chance to be employed. As part of the BRETE strategy led by the Ministry of Work, we provide training and professional development to secondary education graduates, but who have not moved ahead in their schooling. They are granted employment-oriented training by means of result-oriented contracts. Each company takes on the role of providing training to a team of young people, and they must ensure that at least 80% of these young people will be given an opportunity or a job post. In conclusion, my country has just completed a number of alternatives which are currently being reviewed at this point under close scrutiny so as to pinpoint what in the next few years the entrepreneurial alternatives will be. From an economic perspective, the Ministry of Finance has helped improve macroeconomic indicators, which in turn has led to two very good results in the social sector. We have reduced the debt and renegotiated the government debt under better conditions, with which the country has managed to free up funds that had otherwise been channeled to social protection. In 63% of our budget spending, we are able to cover with our own funds and 33% with debt. Another important result of proper macroeconomic management in Costa Rica is the inflation level, which has kept at one digit for many years, never more than 3%. And this is certainly, of course, very relevant for people at this have been really necessary, and they are the reason why we have made the progress we have made. As far as resilience is concerned, we have established a national registry which enables us to anticipate climate events, and it also enables us to take better decisions regarding social infrastructure, with which we are now beginning to bridge territorial gaps as regards actual access to public services. Thank you so much, Madam Leon, for focusing attention on the need for a strategic vision and priorities as part of these compounding and compelling challenges. I would also like to highlight some of the elements that are very directly related to some of the talks we have held during this conference and in the different meetings during this regional conference. I'm talking particularly about the idea of reaching out to all of those who need help and a universal approach, but sensitive to any differences, as well as social policy that will be efficient and sustainable in time, as well as the idea or notion of a social authority that is in a position to negotiate with stakeholders and interlocutors from other sectors, to negotiate and be able to enter into negotiations to overcome the barriers that we all face, as you highlighted, and ultimately be in a position to truly implement public policies. And of course, that involves interinstitutional coordination efforts, which are found not only in the social sector, but also elsewhere. So these are the key points I'd like to highlight, and I want to thank you so much again for your presentation. At this point, the Vice Minister for Social Protection from Guatemala, Berta Zapeta, has the floor. Thank you so much, and good morning to all members of the head table. It gives me great pleasure to be here with you. It is really an honor. I could not possibly fail to use the opportunity today, because today we will be closing the event, but tomorrow is September the 5th, a very important day for autochthonous and indigenous people, especially indigenous women. Tomorrow marks the International Day of Indigenous Women, September the 5th, and I wish to convey my message of solidarity as well as my brotherly and respectful greetings to all indigenous women who uphold the network of life and care. So my special greetings to all indigenous women. Moving on now to the topic at hand regarding the challenges that have been put forth in this panel session, I will briefly refer to those challenges which I believe are the most relevant challenges for Guatemala, or at any rate, the major challenges regarding labor inclusion, climate change, demographic changes, and technology changes. In this regard, we don't really have an absolute response in terms of identifying what is the, say, most significant challenge, but I can certainly pinpoint, for example, in the case of Guatemala, what challenges we currently face and which we have been devoting more attention to. One of such challenges is the ongoing demographic change and its interrelationship with labor inclusion. It is my view that that is certainly the most substantial challenge. Guatemala is currently at a stage in time experiencing a demographic bonus, which is really an opportunity for investment in the development of human capital and social protection. Guatemala has a mostly young population structure, as you can tell by looking at me, meaning we have a high number or proportion of people who are at working age, which creates a sustainable demand for employment, services, and transition into the labor life. Without actual policies, this may translate into high unemployment rates among young people, informality, and also migration flows. Just to give you one piece of information, 70% of our population in Guatemala is currently working in the informal economy, and the increasing pressure on social services plus a growing young population steps up the demand for high quality education services, mother childhood services, nutrition, as well as adequate housing. If that is not followed by productive development as well as formal employment, poverty and inequality may go up, thereby impairing social cohesion. By contrast, structural inequality and poverty, we have substantial disparities between the urban and the rural areas, as well as between indigenous peoples. The young demography or the young demographic profile combined by a low educational coverage and limited opportunities worsens gaps in terms of access to formal jobs and well-paid job opportunities. The transition, the demographic transition, with its effects on savings and services, and also the effect on educational structure and sanitation or health infrastructure, should be planned for the long run. It is never enough. We must, at the same time, add momentum to the economy and create more jobs. As regards the other challenges, including the technological change, we know it is a global and increasing challenge, particularly increasing in Guatemala, including risks for structural impacts if the labor force does not update its skills and knowledge. Technology can be lever if it is truly followed by access to connectivity, digital literacy, and upskilling programs. Climate change, likewise, cannot be forgotten. Guatemala is vulnerable to natural disasters and climate variations. The climate challenge affects key sectors such as agriculture, housing, infrastructure, and may further exacerbate poverty and migration flows. In view of these three overarching challenges, what are our priorities and what are we doing about them? Priority number one: a nationwide social protection system. And I want to make sure you hear my message about the importance of having such a system in place. My country doesn't really have a formal social protection and well-established social protection system. But what we have are 5 isolated components, which are nevertheless important to consolidate a formal social protection system. A priority in our case is the task of designing an inclusive social protection system based on an anchors approach, adaptive in nature, and also to provide emergency services and culturally relevant and directed towards universal social coverage. It is made up by 4 different subsystems, i.e. social assistance or welfare, care, social security, and one of the other priorities includes an interinstitutional coordination strategy to reduce or alleviate poverty and malnutrition. Other priorities include implementation of an interinstitutional space for coordination efforts to fight in a more comprehensive manner poverty, malnutrition in the poorest municipalities or cities. This has been fully mapped out. I mean, the issue has been totally diagnosed. I'm not sure it happens in your country, but in your countries, but in my country, what has happened is that we have a lot of diagnosis, from the local governments, from the municipal governments. There are 114 municipalities in Guatemala that have been diagnosed for more than 20 years already as being the poorest municipalities. And why does the state remain absent from these territories? I think the answer can be found in the fact that these are the farthest away, the most remote municipalities. And that is why our effort currently focuses on being able to reach out to these municipalities in an interinstitutional fashion, approaching 9 different work dimensions and based on a human rights approach, which includes anything from housing, social protection, education, healthcare, agriculture, economic mobilization, basic services, territorial governance, and communication towards social change. On the other hand, challenges also include improving the targeting and including more users of social policies in Guatemala. In other words, how can we get them to migrate towards more agile, more nimble, and assertive systems that will help us truly target those whom we wish to benefit. We have also developed a series of programs that have enabled us to meet the needs of the population, including the young population, by means of a program called Scholarships for Our Future. The very first time a budget appropriation in Guatemala is appropriated to the tune of 220 million quetzales for higher education, a grant to young people. We have also designed credit programs called Tomanik. We have also learned lessons from other countries in the region, such as Colombia, Haiti, Chile. We have heard the actions that they have taken on regarding emergency initiatives, and we now have social protection in view of energy and emergency shocks. We have also designed a cash or non-conditional cash transfer programs that can be mobilized in response to emergencies such as droughts, floods, and forest fires. We have also established the emergency bonus by means of a ministerial agreement, and we're currently in the process of passing enabling legislation and drafting and operating handbook. In the case of the threat to local government actions, the government has established the contingency protocol to address seasonal hunger so as to reduce morbidity among children due to acute malnutrition. In this regard, we have made gradual and progressive progress. We view social protection as a broad umbrella that encompasses not only assistance but also promotion and care, as well as social insurance. And that, of course, we cannot achieve or accomplish all by ourselves. We are the Ministry for Social Development, the youngest such ministry in Guatemala. We have been in place for about 12 years, and we will certainly invite you for our 15th anniversary. We are the youngest ministry, and the challenge we have at hand consists in ensuring coordination among different ministries. Social protection itself is not for us to do all by ourselves. We must be in coordination with other ministries, other secretariats, and other mechanisms that will allow us to jointly make progress and work with the most vulnerable population, as well as those that are at poverty and at extreme poverty. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Zapeta, for your remarks, focusing on the challenges that Guatemala faces. I would simply like to touch on 2 aspects that you brought up. Everything was important, but I would highlight the importance of belonging to a culture. Sometimes we make our protection uniform, but not really universal. And so we need to adapt this locally. And also, you mentioned the issues of malnutrition in the case of Guatemala, which affects the entire region, actually, for malnutrition or obesity. In some countries with both loads of poor nutrition. And that affects not just the population that directly suffers, not just the malnourished boys and girls and adults, men and women who are overweight and obese. It affects entire society and the economy. And just to give a warning about the works that we have been doing, in the case of Guatemala, this may be equivalent to more than 16% of a country's GDP. That means lost opportunities. As it's often been said, investing in social issues means something, means opportunities. In the case of Guatemala, it's very important for the situation of the region, especially poor nutrition, as the minister said. I'll give the floor now to the Director General of the Gloria Reyes, the social development in the Dominican Republic. Good morning, Your Excellencies and colleagues and multilateral.
So we see a conversion from wage earners to service providers through platforms, which may lead to very precarious labor relations. And that's another form of impact. And lastly, the third level of impact to be anticipated has to do with working conditions. To what extent can we actually surveil the worker in his or her workplace or environment? To what extent is it needed? To what extent is it necessary to protect their personal biometric information or data? Extreme situations involve certain factories where people measure every biometric functions, including blood pressure, etc., of workers in the workplace. And what implications may that possibly have, or can that possibly have in their career? To what extent do you use technology to recruit workers? All of that, of course, we know has to do with the ongoing digital transition. As regards the ecological or the green environmental transition, I'd like to segregate or separate this into two blocks. Number one, as the energy mix changes and as we move towards an energy mix that is more, or that was more focused on the fossil fuels, and as we move towards an energy mix that is more focused or concentrated on clean energy, wind energy, electric energy, of course there is a disruptive impact, and that cannot be denied. A recent ILO IDB study indicates that the impact or the destructive impact may potentially reach up to 5 million job posts. However, on the other hand, the constructive or the creative impact is actually higher, and that is true, that is so because clean energies are more labor intensive than fossil fuels or fossil fuel types of energy. The clean energy market is more atomized and has more of an impact at the local development level. An oil platform, for example, that creates or millions and millions of oil barrels requires a lot of people, hundreds of people. It is, of course, a market that is dominated by large oil companies, usually state-owned oil companies that have huge power and very often a monopoly on the market, as opposed to, for example, small solar panel market, or the small solar panel market. Therefore, the labor density or job density in clean energies is about 5 times higher than is the case in fossil fuels. So the net impact for Latin America would be 15 million net jobs that would be thereby destroyed or eliminated. At the same time, you would see in parallel more jobs being created in the clean economy. So clean energies are more positive in terms of job creation. But of course, there will not be an invisible hand that will, of course, bring a worker from the oil platform today and move him or her over to an energy or solar energy photovoltaic industry. It doesn't happen that automatically. Another impact is the so-called thermal stress. The thermal stress is a topic that we're going to be addressing in the upcoming Conference of the Parties, COP30. Today, if you review the incidence of diseases, occupational diseases, and workplace-related accidents, the fact is that workers' heart, kidneys, lungs, and brains have been the most affected organs. Cardiovascular diseases have abruptly increased due to higher temperatures, thermal stress. We're talking about 3.4 billion workers, essentially everyone, by the way, on the planet who do not or who does not work under air conditioning systems. People who are exposed to thermal stress, rural workers, cardiovascular disease, and also skin diseases. We estimate that in Brazil, 1 out of every 3 cancer cases last year could have been avoided because it was the result of physical exposure to heat, sunlight, and adverse conditions. Lung disease as well, due to pollution, and also mental health, a recurrent problem. In addition to natural disasters, which were discussed by my colleagues in the panel. Last year in Brazil, we had floods in Brazil's southernmost state, which affected firsthand 40,000 jobs, which had to be reconstructed or rebuilt, reestablished. So these are the different, say, dimensions or tiers I would like to highlight, indicating how the green ecological transformation affects the labor world. And in the second part of the presentation, I'd like to talk about solutions that may potentially mitigate the effects while stimulating any opportunities available. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Minister Vinicius Pinheiro, for your presentation. Of course, the labor inclusion is very central, and it is very much a guiding principle of our discussions, a guiding driver in our discussions. We have said that there can be no inclusive social development if there is no labor inclusion, and it is our view that this is indeed a priority. I'd like to highlight one element when we talk about placing people at the very center. I mean, we fully agree with you. We see eye to eye here. And following this line of analysis and in line with the proposal we have put forth for the Global Pact for Inclusive Social Development, we want to make sure that investment decisions and labor-related decisions should not follow a logic that do not include people, because if that is the case, only with difficulty will results change in the end of the day. That involves, of course, labor inclusion, a key driver for a broader approach to decision making and evaluation of not only public policies but also of investments in general. We have experiences from international banks that have already mainstreamed that kind of concept, so that the result, as you yourself indicated, Mr. Pinheiro, be not the loss of jobs, but rather the creation of jobs. We believe that employment should be a variable to be taken into account in investments. Otherwise, only with difficulty would the outcome actually be changed. And this is something that we have clearly discussed and very much put on the table during our discussions and roundtables during this conference. We will now devote a few more minutes so that each participant in this panel session can help us understand what the forward-looking challenges are likely to be and what we should be committed to as a region of the world to indeed favor more opportunities while controlling risks and making progress towards inclusive social development with the specific perspectives from different countries.
We have to find a way to create meaning in this changing world. The few points that I would leave you with in terms of the takeaway from our region is that in Barbados we have what we call the social partnership. It is made up of the business society, the civil society, the trade union movement, and the government. And essentially, it is our compass in difficult times. So whenever we're facing challenges, we take everything to the social partnership. And that guides the way we do everything in Barbados, whether it is business related, whether it is government. It is how we address COVID. It is how we address crime. The social partnership is important as a kind of an anchor. And I think every society now needs to find its own anchor. We have to decentralize and embed our social protection at the community level. I think a lot of the times we have these conversations, but they're being had at a macro level, and we need to get down to the ground and to work where the people are. If we truly believe that people are resilient, then we must also recognize that the solutions lie in the people and that we must work closely with the people. We also have to embrace technology and digital governance to reduce fragmentation. A lot of what we've seen is the fragmentation across our systems. And essentially, we have to look at the world through an equity lens. What are we doing for the most vulnerable? How are we filling those gaps that exist? How are we making sure that we break intergenerational poverty? Are we targeted enough in our interventions? And I think going forward, it's not enough to just say we're doing things, but are these things working? Are they targeted? I think the point was also made earlier, and I agree, is that we have to ring fence social protection from political cycles. We've done that well in some cases in Barbados, and in other cases we haven't done it very well, to make sure that programs that work, regardless of the government, are continued. And that only works if we have proper systems, and systems only last if we have strong institutions. So again, we have to go back to building institutions. In Barbados, our youth unemployment rate is significantly higher, as in most places, than the overall unemployment rate. And we have to continue investing in our young people, especially in this technological era. They know more about the world than we give them credit for. I think we have to bring young people to the table. Regrettably, even in this room, most of us are not young. And so we have to find a way to bring young people into this conversation at every level, not just in a token kind of way, but even at these meetings, young people should be at this head table. I think it's been our tragic experience that we've had hurricane after hurricane, event after event. Our coral is dying, our fish is dying. Barbados and the Caribbean is being impacted by climate change in a real way. So we know a lot. I think we also have a lot to offer the world in terms of how to build protection systems in a time of climate change from our tragic experience alone. So I would conclude by simply saying that at the end of the day, social ministries have to get it right. I feel that social ministries stepped up a lot during COVID, and somewhere along the line, we've allowed ourselves to become very small. And that recognizing that we're living in a time of constant peril, social ministries must be on point every single time. It is as if we were prepared to be good during COVID, and now we've gone back being small. And this is not a time for us to be small. So my last point would simply be, there is a flood coming. We can see it. There's a flood coming. And, no one, even those who run to the hills, will be protected from the flood. And therefore, at the end of the day, we have to be able to deal with these issues now, aging, as we're seeing all over the Caribbean, all over Latin America. The disability situation where persons with disabilities still feel left out of the conversations. How do we bring them to the table? How do we address crime in a way that makes sense? And all these things being dealt with in a real, practical way. And, and I think we have to do so lastly by honoring the past, but looking forward to a very new future. In our anthem, we say we are strict guardians of our heritage, but we are also firm craftsmen of our fate. And that is the advice that I would give the conference, and that is the position that we take. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Ministro Humphrey, por poner el foco.
Minister Humphrey, for focusing on the priorities that Barbados perceives, particularly linked to focusing on people, as you mentioned, taking things to the local territories, as Peru raised yesterday. And the key point to ensure sustainability for the social ministries and their capacity to deal with all this, and not wait for the emergency to come to go into history of not having been the priority. And that's very important to continue working on that in this conference. Now, Minister Yorleni Leon will hear your comments. Thank you very much. This issue, the key messages it makes it easier right now. But let's see. My suggestion is, as I said at the beginning, these challenges are not easy, definitely not, but nor are they impossible to solve. Humanity over years has faced complex situations, challenges equal or greater to what we are facing now. And humanity has come through them and overcome them. And so we should not be the exception. I dare to suggest personally that we take on common sense conversations, commitments, transparency, efficiency, and the maximum use of technology. They have always been good allies for us to move forward. A second key message I would like to leave is focus, focus, focus. Let's not get lost in the noise or in the darkness that we are in the midst of every day. We have to have it very clear what our priorities are for our countries and work towards those priorities and focused on those priorities. Otherwise, it will be hard to come up with any key results. The third key message is that we support initiatives like what Brazil has been offering of eradication of hunger in the Second World Summit on Poverty, and so that all of our countries can carry out many actions to push those initiatives locally, nationally, and regionally and internationally. And those initiatives have to be shared with the world to show what our concerns are and how we need to solve those problems and what our commitment is to solve those challenges that we face. We cannot miss the chance to tell the world about this because it's relevant. So relevant, I would say, that our social contracts right now in most of our countries in Latin America are at stake. So I would conclude by calling on all of you to give our best efforts on all these agendas to generate conditions that will allow us to meet the challenges in the social sector, both through promotion and through protection. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minister, for emphasizing the communicating our region's voice and making it present. I'll now give the floor to the Vice Minister Berta Zapeta. We have to take a deep breath now. When the question is, how should we look at the future? How do we see ourselves? Going back to the example of 30 years ago in Copenhagen, a starting point is that we should not let another 30 years go by to talk globally about social development. We must do this urgently and emergently and as an emergency, because we're talking about an immediate future. Also, we have to look at social protection as a right, not as a spending item, or as help, but to put people in the middle of social protection. If we invest in people who need care and in people who give care, we are investing not just in the present, but the future of our countries. That is relevant. On the other hand, it's also important that we be able to invest more in social protection in our different countries. and ensure the sustainability of what we are doing in terms of social protection. A third element that I would like to emphasize is regarding institution and governance. We can no longer work in institutions as we did 20, 30 years ago. We have to be in the vanguard of what today the globe, the planet is demanding of us. A fourth element I see is how we can create protection networks against the technological shocks, because it's here, but we're not ready yet to respond to that. And there's no doubt that it's also important that since it's here, we have to have its impacts on inclusive social development that can have major impacts for our region. Thank you. Thank you very much, Vice Minister. And I highlight your final words that link us directly to what we have been talking about in these last days. I'll now give the floor to the Gloria Reyes, the Director General of the Dominican Republic. We see challenges that can redefine our challenge with social policies that are more inclusive and innovative. And in my comments, I would like to focus specifically on what has to do with the challenge of technological transformation and labor, because at the beginning I talked about climate change. And in that sense, the Dominican Republic has committed to three key aspects. First, to push professional training for the digital economy, and that has a clear premise that we need to train for what the market demands and foresee families' needs to use digital inclusion, to achieve and use digital inclusion. So we want the digital access for all families, for example, to banking, and also the labor supply to understand the needs of the market to be more effective in meeting that demand. Second, since we have new platforms for labor integration, we're on a study with the World Bank. We're looking at the individual training and profiles to achieve new possibilities. And third, to look at the technological certification per people. Our main asset, as I said, is coordinating social protection, talking about protection and economic inclusion and promotion of people to make progress to have better data for better policies, and with the new technologies that using multidimensional models to classify homes with greater precision and better focus for the programs we are carrying out will give us more opportunities for our solutions to reach the people that really need them. And the integrated approach, as we heard, that we need a more integrated approach to each home with more robust data to be more specialized and direct for more effective policies and connect with real opportunities for families' lives. And we are all aware here that there are major challenges in institutional changes that is needed, the fragmentation, the digital gaps, and also the efforts to strengthen care infrastructure, which are still insufficient. And to overcome this, we need innovation, regional cooperation, and strengthening our institutions, since we are convinced that no family can be left behind. In the Dominican Republic, I see from the experience of other countries, we are all moving towards more integrated models with economic production, care, and regional cooperation. Thank you. Thank you very much, Director Reyes. And I would highlight once again the major importance of strengthening institutions in different sectors. Finally, Dr. Vinicius Pinheiro from ILO. Thank you, Rodrigo. I would like to go back to the point that you raised when you spoke about the need to coordinate inclusive growth with labor inclusion, and that spirit of the SDG number 8, the combining economic growth with employment. For there to be employment, there must be growth. For that growth to be inclusive and sustainable, it must generate employment, not just employment, but decent jobs. So today in the 2030 agenda, which is in the final stretch now, we have to see in the light of the accelerating digital transformation, which was not so present when the 2030 goals were set. And I would also like to raise 6 points that I think are part of this roadmap towards a future where people have to be at the center. The future is not be taken for granted. It's made by public policy decisions. The first has to do with respecting fundamental rights of workers. We live in a region that is a region of contrasts. While we have to confront the future challenges, demographic, environmental, and technological, we have not solved the past history of child labor, slave labor. And so we are in a region that has 1 foot in the 21st century with its opportunities and challenges, but we still have not solved problems that go into our past. So in terms of fundamental rights are a lighthouse, a guideline, a guide for us. No matter how bad the seas may be, we have to look at the land and see that we cannot have child exploitation. We cannot have slave labor. We have to have safe working conditions that are acceptable. And all of those principles are part of fundamental workers' rights. Second is the need for coordination, like with the platforming of the economy. Debate not just in Brazil, but in all of Latin America. There has been progress in countries like Mexico, Uruguay, and Chile, where they regulate platform labor. The labor relations of the worker between the platform and the employer, whether it's wages or services. And we have to see the autonomy and rights, and it's not just salaried wage labor. What's the minimum wage? What are the maximum number of hours? What's the social protection? Social protection. Today we have an epidemic of accidents of motorcycles that are not even considered work accidents. People out in the streets doing deliveries every week. I see that. And we need to have collective bargaining for these groups, and that are affected by digital transformation. The issue of capacities and skills. We can have a destructive potential for the digital economy, but digitalization. The ILO estimates that 5% of jobs in the region could be totally replaced. So what can we do? First of all, it's fundamental to have intermediation policies to create new jobs, new employment opportunities, and new placements of people with new skills. That has to do with the environmental transition as well. Policies that will affect people who are losing their jobs and will be demobilized into more promising sectors. Systems of social protection that are universal. They're more necessary than ever because every transition has winners and losers, and it has go through moments when people who are losing can become winners. And to do that, we need to have a mattress, a cushion, and can have different basic universal income, universal more social aid and fiscal policies to design such policies, but those social protection policies must exist. And that social protection includes access to services, basic services, and also to some extent access to technology and to process the services, to access the services, and also to get other benefits. And also the importance of social dialogue. As we know, the ILO is the only tripartite organization in the UN system. We have workers, employers, and governments. And then our history of tripartite relations has produced all of our engagement in elaborating conventions, international norms that have power and legitimacy that are fundamental. A practical example, technology may be excellent, but that does not mean it should go to all the factory floors or all the service sectors overnight. It has to be negotiated because there are social impacts, labor impacts, and in many cases it could be put off or brought in together with through a transition. Many countries have shown successful experiences in how social dialogue can lead to new technologies being helpful for all. And we need systems where technology works for the well-being of man, not man working for technology. So that's part of an agenda that's focused on humans. With these observations, I hope to have given you a few points to consider in the future. These points will be discussed very soon in the Dominican Republic. The ILO is organizing in early October its regional American region with its partners in labor and employers. And we have this agenda which complements all the discussions underway here. So thank you very much for the chance to be here with you. I've learned a lot on social development in Latin America. Thank you, Director Pinheiro, for the clear presentation of details. And the last issue of social development, which has been an opportunity that's central. And of course, we began our conversations this week with civil society and its vision and trying to coordinate the different conceptions, interlink them to advance in the proposals that we call the Pact for Social Development, Inclusive Social Development. I'd now like to ask support from the chair for us to move on with our agenda today.
Microphone, please. Microphone, please. Microphone, please. Microphone, please. We have no audio input in the English booth. The Microphone is not working properly. It is working now. I wish to thank Minister Humphrey, Minister Leon, Minister Alberta Sapeta, Director General Gloria Reis, and Director ILO Director Vinicius Pinheiro. Thank you so much for your inputs, your contributions, your presentations and remarks. Before opening the floor to comments from members of the audience, it is my pleasure and it is my honor to return the chair of this meeting to the Deputy Minister and Executive Secretary of the Ministry of Social Development for Brazil, Osmar Almeida Jr. He will be moderating the session as of now. Good morning, one and all. It gives me great pleasure to be in the honorable position to chair this session of this regional conference. I'd like to invite the delegations who wish to voice their views to please raise your nameplates, and I would like the Secretariat to support me with the list of speakers, the speakers lineup or names of speakers who have signed up. Microphone, please. The Peruvian delegation has the floor. Good morning. First of all, I'd like to greet the presiding officers, members of the head table, as well as cabinet ministers attending this session from different countries, as well as ECLAC staff members, as well as UNDP staff members. Greetings likewise to all delegations from Latin America and the Caribbean, from different countries, members of civil society, as well as representatives of international organizations. Warm greetings from the Peruvian government. The topic of social inclusion, climate, demographic, and technological change is such that I would like to devote very briefly 2 or 3 minutes to share our stance on and views on what we have done in Peru, and we would like to somehow contribute to the ongoing regional debate. Macroeconomy in Peru, our macroeconomic indicators position us as one of the leaders in the region. Social spending and the well-being of the population, including alleviation of poverty and improvement of employment conditions.
Pedimos desculpa, o som, we beg your pardon, the sound was very bad. All the microphones were off. We could not understand. We can work again now. The Contigo, With You program with people with severe disabilities, the Polykarma program, the food assistance program for our children, both in grade school and high school, the Peru labor program and for the protector saver, the production sector, in the rural programs, the National Aurora program, in which is to reduce family violence, and these areas are giving a better health coverage for everyone with no exception. And we now have more than 1 million Peruvians who are covered by this program, and we are certain of that. On those challenges for labor inclusion, the objective is to get everyone, no matter where they come from, and capacity or gender, that they have access to decent jobs.
In equal conditions, awareness building and professional training of citizens, including coordinated efforts among the public sector, private sector players, and civil society organizations in order to overcome these social barriers and, of course, promote further investments in education. In Peru, we face the challenge of persistent, lingering social barriers, and even in the 21st century, these remain lingering barriers. Climate change on climate change in Peru, we have been implementing hydropower, thermal plants, geothermal energy solutions, photovoltaic energy solutions, so as to offset and counter fossil fuel, which is the source of greenhouse gases. We're also moving or changing the railway and automotive mix by means of clean, sustainable energy. As regards the demographic change, people in the healthcare systems are key, and the labor market even more so, as 24 to 45 is just around the corner, and we will see a major drop in the labor market because there will be very few young people in that very close by future, and it will have an impact on social cohesion because we will have less employment and not more economic growth. Again, regarding the technological development, as mentioned earlier by the Dominican Republic delegate, we will experience state-of-the-art energy transition, and this will impact every country, and it will also ensure or help our manufacturing industry to contribute together with digital connectivity. Microphone, please. Our manufacturing industries to create inclusive jobs, which is precisely what we pursue, and this precisely what I have seen over the past 3 days in this conference. That in turn will alleviate poverty and will trigger social and economic development. Finally, in sum, as we mentioned yesterday, without territorial integration, there can be no social development, no social human development, because the connectivity among our peoples and among the peasant, indigenous, and autochthonous and non-connected, non-contact communities are the only visible way for us to see that inclusive social development is indeed taking place and indeed bridging the social gaps that we need to close in our region. Thank you so much. Would any other delegations like to voice their views at this time? The floor is open. Let us now start our next panel session. The next point in the panel session, as per the program, is about the agreements and approval of agreements, review and approval of agreements. So before we start examining the agreements, let me give the floor to our secretary. Thank you very much, Mr. President. There are two outstanding decisions to be made. One regarding the formation of the presiding officers or head table, countries that will join Brazil in chairing or leading this conference in the next 2 years. Countries that have voiced their interest in joining Brazil and the head table are as follows, and I will read them. They include Barbados, Ecuador, Guatemala, Panama, Paraguay, the Dominican Republic, and Uruguay. If we all agree, we can therefore approve the proposed countries that will be joining Brazil in chairing the conference for the next 2 years. Oh, by the way, the president must use the hammer to officially approve the suggested countries. The second point, Mr. President, is a draft resolution 6, Romans 6, which was circulated yesterday and which contains the main consensus of this conference, as well as the next steps for the next few years. So I would like to again consult with the delegations whether we are in a position to approve that draft resolution number 6. If that is the case, very well, Mr. President, there you go with the hammer. The gavel. Very good. Very well. Since the proposals have been approved, dear delegates, yesterday, oh, by the way, excuse me, says the President, says the Chairperson. By the way, if there are no objections, says the President, I'd like to invite you to join me in a round of applause, and the head table presiding officer will be made up by the following. If there are no further remarks at this time, I would like to give the relevant speaker the floor so that we can start the closing session. Very well. We now start the closing session of this 6th Regional Conference on Social Development and 17th Forum on Social Development, organized both by ICLAC and by UNDP. I'd like to invite WENA, the UNDP, Almudena, rather, Fernandez, the UNDP representative, to please join us at the head table. With which we should be in a position to start the closing ceremony. We have a video clip that has been sent to us by the Minister for Social Development and Social Assistance, Dr. Wellington Diaz of Brazil, which we will now watch. We thought we would not only watch but also hear the minister's voice in the video clip. The interpreters have no sound input in the interpretation booth, unfortunately. To support implementation and follow-up of the commitments that will arise from the second Global Summit on Social Development to be held in Doha. If there is a lesson that we can derive from the past 2 days marked by discussion exchanges and collective exchanges of experiences, the lesson is that we have made progress. We have made progress in each and every country in their own priorities, but we have also made progress as a region by means of a shared vision towards inclusive social development. The wealth of experiences that we heard and saw here regarding social protection and care systems, and also as regards food and nutritional security, primary health care, education, and productive inclusion efforts. All of the above confirms the vitality and the leadership of this region of the world in effective social policies. It is a living heritage that serves as a source of inspiration. We must always, of course, keep on strengthening our efforts, and we do truly hope that all of you felt welcome in Brazil. It's been an honor to welcome you in Brasilia. And again, we'd like to, from the bottom, we'd like to for the technical and political partnership, which has proved so decisive in ensuring a successful conference. I wish to thank SARP CEO Alexandre Amorim for space and wonderful infrastructure that has been afforded to us, which has enabled us to work with comfort and efficiency. I'd also like to voice my special thanks to the Ministry of Social Development, which, together with the ECLAC staff, have tirelessly devoted efforts to organize this event while ensuring that every detail would live up. and ensure digital transformation in the region. We have budget problems. We have difficult political debates going on in our countries. However, it is very heartening to see everything that has happened in hindsight over the past 30 years by way of social progress. And it is very heartening and encouraging to see that with this better foundation, we can do more in the next 30 years. We know that the international context or scenario is a challenging one, including crises that have tested the resilience of our societies. But we also know that when we place children, when we place people at the center of our agenda, when we work with a sense of consciousness, social participation, and budget priorities, results emerge, and they do emerge very quickly. I wish you all, ladies and gentlemen, a safe return back to your capital cities and countries. And let us travel back with us not only with the resolutions we have passed and approved, but also the confidence that it is indeed possible to speed up the pace of changes that our populations expect and deserve. I do hope to see you again for the upcoming Global Summit on Social Development in Doha, so that together we can take the next step ahead in this joint journey with a sense of shared dignity, social justice, and development for all. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much, Vice Minister, for your remarks and also for Brazil's leadership and support, not only in this conference, but also in the next conferences, and for leading the process. I'd like to give the floor now to our strategic partner, UNDP. They have been with us from day one in this conference. It is a strategic partnership in the framework, in the UN framework, where the mandates, the importance, and also the UN 80 initiative is discussed. A UN that will be closer to the territory, closer to the governments. The example given to us by UNDP and the CLAC in this conference is something that, of course, governments attach a great deal of value to, and which we would like to acknowledge at this point. Almudena, you now have the floor.
We're sorry, her sound is not coming in. The chair's sound was coming into the booth, but her sound is not. Now it's on. And my colleagues from ECLAC who have taken on the hard part of organizing this conference, and of course my other colleagues at UNDP and the UN system who have been with us in these days. Esteemed ministers, colleagues, delegates, and we have had very intense conversation that are very fundamental. In concluding this conference, I would like to highlight just 3 messages that have come out strong for me from these conversations. First, inclusive social development is not an option. It's an indispensable condition for Latin America. We have heard these days that we all agree on that. The discussions in these 2.5 days have reminded us that the struggle against hunger, poverty, and inequality are the starting point for any social pact. And also we have heard clearly that the magnitude of challenges has changed. The objective is still the same, but the path to get there is changing with the new circumstance. We have climate crises that are more and more intense, accelerated technological change, increasing demographic changes that many of our countries are feeling closely. In addition to growing migratory flows and tensions within our societies. In that context, social inclusion cannot just be seen as a sectoral policy, but as a compass that should guide the entire development models in our country. Second fundamental point has been the care policies that are important. The need to recognize care, not just as a complement, but a fundamental pillar of well-being and productivity. The care frees time for millions of women and caretakers to generate dignified employment and ensure that children and the elderly live with more dignity and well-being. To count on well-being in our region means more just societies. Third, we talked about resilience as strategic capacity of our policy. We know what it means to lose in days, weeks, or hours what has taken decades to build. That's why we need universal, sustained, resilient, and adaptive protection systems that can absorb shocks and protect the most vulnerable and sustain human capacities and people in times of crisis. Resilience is not just resistance, as we said, it's the possibility to recover and to turn threats into opportunities to advance. And it's very important, and we have the resolution we just approved confirms what we said these days is not to stay in this room. It's a common agenda for our future. The social summit in Doha is a historic opportunity for us in Latin America and the Caribbean to work together on future development. And we can take our learning, our proposals, and have a global conversation on the future of development in the world. As we've already heard in these days, our region has much to contribute. The examples speak for themselves. We meet once a year, and every year there's innovation in what each of these countries is doing. We learn new things. We learn how to do things better. From here to Doha and beyond Doha, we have a clear task, namely to build a common agenda to strengthen and to work regionally for social cohesion and resilience as something that is a framework for our inclusive social development. An agenda that will allow us to together confront the complex problems that we face today. And I will conclude with an idea that global uncertainty it means that we have to work globally to reduce the uncertainties and open the ways and horizons of hope for our young people. The road to Doha is now an invitation to reaffirm that the more resilient and inclusive future is not built alone, but through cooperation and collective commitments. Thank you very much. Thank you, Almudena. It's always an honor to give the floor to a colleague from ECLAC, in this case, Alberto Arenas, the Chief of Social Development Division, who leads one of the most divisions that's most committed and cohesive work that works so well, and they have a whole staff with them and with a lot of flexibility. It's an honor to see the leadership of this group. It's very complex what they face, to look at the modalities, the forms, the creativity, to be able to carry out this meeting, all the parallel, the side events, and to have the discussions take place and the document presented that will soon open up many spaces and ambitions for the conference. Alberto, your final words. Thank you very much, Luis, for this friendly introduction, and good morning to all of you. I first of all greet the Executive Secretary of the Ministry of Social Development and Family and the Fight Against Hunger in Brazil, Mr. Osmar Jr. Thank you very much for being with us in this closing session of our regional conference. Almudena from UNDP, we thank you very much for being here. And ministers, authorities, and representatives of social ministers and their equivalents, thank you for being in Brazil celebrating the 6th regional conference on social development in Latin America and the Caribbean, and the 17th Ministerial Forum in Latin America and the Caribbean. In this occasion, when you opened our regional conference 2 days ago, our executive secretary from ECLAC wished us 3 days of work and reflection with great success, and that we be able to come up with lessons for social transformation that are of quality to overcome the traps of development and for a more productive and inclusive and sustainable future. The 3 days have gone by, and we thank the delegations for being here in Brasilia and also for their commitments and dedication to get to this end. An element that was centered for us to move forward and make effective our collaboration. To organize this regional conference in Brazil through Minister Wellington Dias, as we have heard, is with the President Lula now in launching a powerful new program covering 15 million people, Brazilians, and so Mr. Osmar Jr., the Executive Secretary, please send the Minister our thanks for all the hospitality, the friendliness, the welcome, the warmth from all of us all of us. We wish the wishes for the entire Ministry of Social Development in Brazil for their spirit of cooperation, this ongoing support, finding solutions, and warmth of the reception we have had in these days in Brasilia. I would also recall that we came to the regional conference with a lot of issues to work on, and with a sustained work over the past 2 years under the presidents and led by Minister Javiera Toro, whom I thank for all the support we've gotten. We have worked very hard with all of you, reaffirming the sense that we must take this unique opportunity of the Second World Summit to express our region's voice. And many people here in these 3 days of conference have heard our call for a global pact for inclusive, sustainable development that put people at the center with lives that are free of inequality and hunger. I would like to mention some ideas that came out of the debates in these 3 days. First of all, what Minister Toro from Chile said, the document presented by ECLAC referred to the complex times we are facing in the world and in our region, with threats and questioning opening against democracy and the agenda of rights in the world, and decided to work for a new development model with people with their rights at the center. And also our friend, the president of the chairman of this conference, Wellington Dias, we talked about the confidence of our governments in the UN system and the need to strengthen the rights and the progress of social progress that be integral and resilient and constant, and that militants for inclusive social development should be aimed at the second the Doha summit, which is just weeks away now. We need to reinforce the role of state and public services as mechanisms for redistribution against fiscal evasion, and to fight for the elimination of extreme poverty, to have social development recognizing policies with financial stability. We should highlight the vision for greater intersectoral coordination, and that respond to the needs of the risks and expectations of citizenry. The intersectionality means the need to strengthen overall social protection institutions and also care programs and education and fight against hunger and poverty. The efforts in Panama to have more subsidies for this is very important in terms of work being focused on local territories, and also effective coordination of social protection with inclusion, labor inclusion, and autonomous capacity of local people with low income. We cannot we cannot forget issues raised by Costa Rica, that decisions be based on data, that there be transparency, and that social participation be part of all of us. And with a focused on political struggles, to have the social people's involvement at the center. And the Dominican Republic said it's not all equal. We have to adapt to the policies to a standard of investment for social protection that's not contributive and aimed at eradicating poverty. To coordinate political decisions is not just leadership, but also building broad, inclusive social dialogue to contribute to legitimizing the strengthening of policies and institutions, building a care policy in Brazil, and the process underway in Uruguay. Social dialogue are notable examples. The backbone of inclusive social development are the social protection systems that are sustainable and inclusive. And we must strengthen resilience, not to allow, not to lose options of protecting people's lives. As Almudena said yesterday afternoon from UNDP, but also the capacity to respond, to not lose that capacity to respond. This is not new, but we feel the urgency. First of all, because the progress towards the objectives of the 2030 goals have not been enough. In the content of the agenda, the state commitments and society's commitments have raised new questionings frequently because of misinformation and polarization. And we have also heard from Barbados this morning, and analyzing social protection is would be incomplete if we don't look at the local, national, and global dimensions, and where we see the factors that raise the challenges for us to make progress. 30 years after Copenhagen, we have the chance at the Second World Summit on Social Development to once again push forward. We hope that this conference has been a link in that chain and contribute to inclusive social development, where the voice of Latin America and the Caribbean be a coordinating force. And many things have been said in these 2 days. I can't talk about all of them. I'm sorry if I've left out some of the important examples that you have raised. But in short, I would raise a few points. The social protection systems that are with new energy to achieve transformation, to reduce gender inequality in care systems and labor inclusion, production transformation, social mobility, the transforming health systems for the consolidate pension systems with the accelerated growth of elderly population, need for more cooperation, coordination for concrete policies for people, mobilizing resources and multilateral cooperation to ensure financial opportunities for inclusive social development. I would also like to highlight the role of civil society and the importance to advance towards inclusive social development. So by holding the meeting of civil society on Monday here in Brazil, together with the mechanisms of participation of civil society in the Sustainable Development Agenda and the Forum of Latin American and Caribbean countries on sustainable development, that effectively, as we said in the day before the beginning of this conference, we were able to accompany that work in recent months with several working groups that concluded with a wonderful presentation, a wonderful meeting on Monday and then on Tuesday, they presented their conclusion with the sustained contributions of all the countries here, we have dealt with several different parallel issues that have to do with social cohesion, non-contributory systems, the reducing inequalities and effectively creating the more effectiveness of social policies and for informal labor in our region, and side events as well on hunger and poverty led by Brazil. And another element is that today is not just one more regional conference that we're having. Today it's been 10 years. And that process we began in 2015 in Lima. We continued in 2017 in Montevideo in Uruguay, in 2019 in Mexico, where we had the landmark of a regional inclusive social development agenda, 2021 with the presence of the Caribbean and Antigua and Barbuda, and the impact of climate change in 2019. 2023, we look at the new roles of social institutions in Chile, for chairing the regional conference, and we began to work for the Second World Summit. And these two characteristics have been very important. We should highlight a focus on interpreting and presenting social reality of our countries and their public policies with an analysis of the causes that have brought us to here, and with a strategic outlook looking at innovation and the effectiveness of dealing with new challenges and creating opportunities, and also with the exchanging and cooperation amongst our countries. We'll make relevant progress also in the working groups where each of your countries has participated. These groups deal with policy issues identified by the companies and effectively have been working in the past 2 years. And these 5 working groups are the institutional frameworks for the institution, with social protection and resilience for natural disasters has been very important for the Caribbean, in the information system, the social registries, the funding, non-contributory funding mechanisms, and then labor inclusion finally, and social inclusion. To conclude, I would like to give some thanks, first of all, to the delegation of Paraguay, which through the Vice Minister of Social Development, Carlos Paris, not only has asked to be part of the board, the head table chaired by Brazil, but to host the 7th meeting of the Regional Conference on Social Development in 2027. And I'm also thankful to the Secretary to Barbados, Guatemala, Ecuador, Panama, Paraguay, Uruguay for their willingness to be part of the board, the leading table, together with Brazil in the next 2 years, and for all the Chilean ministries of social development for their collaboration in the past 2 years, very substantially in representing our regional conference. Of course, I once again thank Brazil for the leadership of Minister Wellington Dias, and through him, we thank Osmar Jr. and their whole team of the ministry in Brazil, coordinated by Renato Gordinho and Ronaldo Sediquara, for all the organizing work to receive us here. And I'd like to take a break and have a great applause for the Brazilian delegation for all that work. And I conclude by thanking the UNDP for its ongoing collaboration. And as we said, this conference, and no doubt the entire staff, the staff that's here and the staff that is remote, thank you for Almudena for all the work that we have done together in these 10 years, and we'll continue to collaborate in the forum, ministerial forum. And I conclude, therefore, by thanking, most particularly, as Luis said, I thank the entire ECLAC staff and team, with the secretariat headed by Luis Yanez, all the staff of the publications of the conference, STIC, and of course, my dear team in Social Development Division. I went beyond the protocol on the first day, talking about Rodrigo Martins, who works on organizing the conference, and once again out of the protocol, to mention the work of the invisible. Maria Palma back there. A round of applause representing the work of the division, and we call on all the delegations to continue our pathway towards Doha in Qatar for a global pact for inclusive social development. Last night, I got a message, a mail from New York, informing me about the last draft that the countries in the world, of the political declaration that will be decided by the General Assembly and then in Doha in Qatar. That political declaration of the second global summit on social development. And just like 30 years ago, in the first World Summit, Global Summit, now in Hague, in Copenhagen, talked about social development, and for the first time in a UN document. We hope that in this document of the second Global Summit, that inclusive social development be mentioned in that declaration, and to say that the still in two parts of our inclusive social development will be discussed and highlighted by our region, because of all the work in our regional conferences. We produced that in this declaration, and there it is present. We commit ourselves to continue to strengthen the fraternal work that characterized this regional conference in the past 10 years, and we will be meeting in the board meetings in some countries of our region, and certainly in Paraguay, in the 7th Regional Conference on Social Development of Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you very much. Whatever's left.